First things first, the Bucs are taking their undefeated show on the road. Next stop, Hollywood. Should they be worried about Matt Stafford and the Rams? The Warriors with a big no thanks for Ben Simmons' services. Are they making a mistake passing on the All-Star? And coming off a loss in Week 2 is Patrick Mahomes under the most duress entering Week 3. Good Thursday morning, everyone. Welcome to First Things First. Oh, I love when I start the show with a question about the Chiefs and Mahomes being under duress. Jenna and Broussard and Kevin Wild. Mahomes is not going to let the Chiefs lose 2 in a row, Nick. There's no way. It's like, it can't happen. It's not out there in the ether to happen.
There is no way. Literally never happened with Mahomes. So, yes, I agree with you. I agree. It's not going to happen because it's an impossibility.
I love when we're on the same page.
It's a good take, Jenna.
Same page this morning. Yeah, full of them, Nick. I'm full of them. We'll get to that in a second. We got to start with rookie Justin Fields, though, set to make his first NFL start. The 11th overall pick in April's draft will be in for the injured Andy Dalton, getting the nod Sunday against the Browns. Fields says he's ready, says he feels like he belongs in this role, that he's made for this, and that the moment, not too big for him. Take a listen.
I think I'm ready. Of course, I've been preparing for this moment a long time, so my mindset doesn't change. I'm still gonna, play like football and just prepare the best I can, like I said before, and just, get a lot of practice reps in and just study, and just get more comfortable and more confident with the plays and stuff like that.
If the team is winning and Justin's playing well, are you obligated? Do you feel as a coach obligated to go back to Andy?
When Andy is healthy, he's our starter, and then I go back for Justin. Justin's worried about right now, and Justin's worried about trying to help us beat Cleveland. I've talked about it this entire time that we're not going to get into that what-if game. We do want to see who's, like when Justin's out here and what he's been doing in practice as a look team, trying to be the best quarterback he can be. That's all we want right now. That's all Andy and Justin want, is to be the best they can be. And then when that time comes, there's a lot of stuff that can happen between now and then. So I don't really want to go there other than just saying that when Andy is healthy, he's our starter.
Old school ringer, the old cell phone. All right, Nick. Nagy's going back to Andy Dalton when he's healthy. What do you make of his comments?
I don't understand what Matt Nagy's doing. And I have actually, we don't talk a ton of Bears on this show, but when it's come up, I've defended Matt Nagy. When you consider the fact he made the playoffs 2 of his 3 years, despite not having quality quarterback play, he learned under Andy Reid. I think there's a lot of things you can say, I think that he could be a good NFL head coach. But that sound we just played boggles the mind. He says, I don't want to get into the what-if game, except there is one what-if I will get into, let me tell you. If Andy Dalton becomes healthy, of course he's the starter because he's Andy Dalton. What are we doing? And if people didn't watch Bears-Bengals, I don't blame you. Not a great game. And if you don't have the ability to watch a bunch of games at once, that was probably not high up the hierarchy. And you just look at Justin Fields' numbers, you say, okay, he played terribly. But he rushed for the first down that essentially iced the game. And he made a throw that Andy Dalton simply hasn't made in 5 years that could have iced the game right here. Perfect throw, and Allen Robinson just drops it. This angle will show you it's just a flat drop. It's not a pass breakup. It is a perfect throw from 42 yards out, right into Allen Robinson's breadbasket, and he drops it. So Justin Fields has to be the guy. And I'm going to say something, I don't even know if it's controversial. It's just something people don't say, even though I think everyone knows, like, this mindset, Broussard, happens at times. I would have thought that Matt Nagy was actually privately, secretly rooting for this exact scenario, for him to be able to keep his promise to Andy Dalton, for Dalton to get dinged, not suffer a major injury, nobody's rooting for that, but a sprained knee, sprained ankle, something that's not going to alter your life but knock you out of the lineup. It's like, oh, well, now I have no choice but to go to Justin and then let Justin keep the job. That has happened. The exact ideal scenario where you get to not be a liar and you get to go with the young quarterback has happened. And he's like, but let me tell you, Andy's the guy. I don't understand why he's doing this, Broussard.
Well, look, people won't admit it, but they do have those thoughts. Human beings do think that way.
Yes.
I'll let the starter sprain an ankle so I can get in and get my 20 points or whatever.
Yes.
I hear you, Nick. But look, to me, there are only two possible explanations for Matt Nagy's stance and his statement that Dalton's the starter when he's healthy. One, and I'm going to speak with some humility here. Justin Fields may not be looking or must not be looking as good in practice as fans and media think.
Yeah.
He must not. There's something that Matt Nagy is not seeing in practice. Okay, because as you said, Nick, there's every reason for him to want Justin Fields to be great. The fans are clamoring for it. The media's clamoring for it. You know, everybody's saying start Justin Fields. You picked him in the first round with the 11th pick, but he's still not going there for a mediocre veteran. That tells me whether it's trouble reading defense, I don't know. But Matt Nagy knows football. He's around Pat Mahomes, for goodness sakes. All right, he knows what he's looking for in a quarterback, and I don't see any other reason but Justin just may not be ready. And Nagy sees it in practices, but we don't see it. He wasn't dynamic in the preseason. He was fine. It was okay. You know, like you said, he threw the nice ball to Allen Robinson, but overall he was 6 for 13 with 60 yards passing and a pick. You know, so maybe Nagy sees that. The second possible explanation is this. He doesn't want to heap more pressure on Justin Fields' shoulders. Because let's say he came out yesterday and said, you know what, Justin's our starter from here on out. You know, it's time. We're ready. He threw, you know, we saw some decent things against the Bengals that maybe you didn't see because of the numbers, but we thought he looked good. He's ready. Okay. And he gets out there in the next 2 or 3 games, struggles mightily. All right, it's bad, and they're losing bad. And then Nagy's forced to go to either Andy Dalton or Nick Foles. Now you've benched your big #1 draft pick, which he's pressure on him, and the national narrative becomes, here's another bust out of Ohio State at the quarterback position. They just can't, their quarterbacks from Ohio State can't do it at the next level. So all of a sudden that becomes a narrative. And so maybe Nagy's protecting Fields from that. And Nick, I'll say this, I have no doubt, there is no doubt in my mind that if Fields goes out there and plays well, not awesome, but well, pretty good, looks good, shows some promise, and they're winning a decent amount, I think he'll remain the starter. But I think Nagy doesn't want to put that pressure on him at this moment in time. Wilds.
So here's the wacky thing about it, Broussard. The Justin Fields, Andy Dalton dynamic predates Justin Fields. Remember when the Chicago Bears social media team put out QB1 on Andy Dalton in March? Everyone's like, huh? He's a QB1 already? I don't think the social media team's going rogue here. They put that out in March before Justin Fields was even in the picture. So the fact that they are locked into Andy Dalton in a way that I think other teams' quarterbacks wish they saw the same loyalty. So, Nick, I've got a solution to this whole mess. And it's a controversial take, but I think you will like it. I think the Packers and the Bears should trade GMs. Because they are doing the exact opposite things to their quarterback. Aaron Rodgers, great quarterback. We drafted Jordan Love and try to push Aaron Rodgers out. Meanwhile, the Bears have Andy Dalton, now a journeyman quarterback. They literally draft a guy who is the future of their franchise, and they refuse to move on. Yeah. So Aaron Rodgers wishes he had the Bears GM and the amount of loyalty that they're showing. It's an easy solution. Trade front offices and everything will be fine. Yeah, just do it.
It's not a terrible idea. I would put the likelihood on it on very slim, but they play each other twice a year. Maybe the owners can get together, even though I guess Green Bay doesn't have an owner. We'll put that on the back burner for now. But I want to revisit something Broussard said that I heard Wilds kind of audibly co-sign, which is, well, there's the possibility that Fields has just been terrible in practice. right? And this is something our ace producer, Stephen Hubbard, who's as good of a guy as there is, except for the fact he's a Raiders fan, but that's not his fault. He brought this up to me this morning as well. He was like, it does make you wonder, has Fields been terrible at practice? That's the other reason Matt Nagy's butchering this. I don't know if Fields been terrible at practice or not, but now that's out there. Now there are multiple people unrelated like, well, I'm trying to figure this out. Because here's what we all know. It's not undying loyalty to Andy Dalton. Sorry, Andy and Andy's friends and family, but he's Andy Dalton. There's nobody out there that's like, well, the reason this is going on is because Dalton's so good. There has to be a subtext. And now there is, I feel like it's almost by not making Fields the starter, you are creating a narrative that maybe he's been really bad in practice. Maybe he's not picking up the offense, because why else would you not? And so I would imagine that the audience thinking, okay, but what if he is bad at practice? What do you want Nagy to do? Take a page out of Belichick's book. And when you're asked about what are you going to do after this week, say we're worried about this week. Justin Fields is our starter this week. What about when Andy gets healthy? Well, listen, we'll cross that bridge when we get there. We are focused. We are locked in on trying to, we got a huge opponent, and the Browns coming up. We're focused on that. You don't have to continue to send these love sonnets to the future Andy Dalton. I don't get it. It just is baffling to me.
Well, look, Nick, if the thought, and it is out there, that maybe he hadn't played well in practice, that's not that bad a thing to have out there. It's not quite a narrative because it's not that big where it's all over the place. The worst narrative would be Justin Fields just isn't that good. All right, and there is no patience for rookie quarterbacks nowadays to struggle. Ask Tua if there's if people give you a little leeway to look bad as a rookie. All right, they really don't. So there is no written rule that because you drafted a quarterback in the first round, he's got to start from day one. Your guy, Pat Mahomes, is exhibit A.
Mahomes.
All right, and so there's nothing wrong with having a guy not be ready his first year. Maybe he'll be ready the second year, and he's the better for it. So I just think this is, like I said, if Fields goes out and plays well, I think this will end up being a moot point because he will remain the starter.
Probably. All right, Justin Fields in for Andy Dalton this week, but look out, buddy. Nick Foles backing you up on Sunday. It's never good when he's your backup. Take a turn talking some Ben Simmons. The Warriors don't seem interested in adding the All-Star. Why isn't he a fit for Golden State? Find out next. First things first. We're drawing a blank. Talking some Ben Simmons after Warriors owner Joe Lacob was fined $50,000 for some rather eye-popping comments he made about Ben. He told the San Francisco Chronicle this: in some ways, it doesn't really fit with what we're doing. He makes a lot of money, and can he finish games? I don't know. He's very talented. The problem is we have Draymond Green. Draymond and him are very similar in the sense that neither one really shoots, and they do a lot of the playmaking. That's one issue. The salary structure is the other. So Broussard, Lacob saying Simmons doesn't fit what the Warriors are doing is blank.
Bullseye, Jenna, bullseye. And I think he's been watching FS1 because I've been saying this from day one. If I've got Ben Simmons, I don't need Draymond Green. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm still interested in Ben Simmons. I'm just looking to put Draymond Green in that package. Ben Simmons is a more athletic, a younger, a bigger version of Draymond Green. And what Draymond did for the Warriors is tremendous, and that's still probably why he's there. But I would look to package him. Now, Philadelphia probably isn't interested in Draymond. But I'd look at I'd throw out a Draymond Green, rookie draft pick, Jonathan Kuminga, and some future picks to get Ben Simmons. I think Ben Simmons would be tremendous in Golden State. And Daryl Morey, your good friend, Nick, maybe he's watching. I hope he's watching. Daryl, you could use Draymond. You need a leader on the court. You need somebody to get in Joel Embiid's rump when it's time. All right, you need a guy to teach your players how to win, and that is Draymond Green. I know the analytics are all numbers, but Draymond's got the intangibles. All right, he brings inspiration to that squad, So he could help you guys in the Eastern Conference. But I'm with Lacob on this. I don't know how you play those two together. It's possible, perhaps. Possible. But two non-shooters on the floor in today's NBA would be tough, Nick. So I'm with Lacob on this.
So I'm not with Lacob, and also I'm very, very surprised because Broussard is as great of an NBA analyst as there is in America. I'm surprised he would just have a fact error on this wrong. It's in the CBA. You can't trade clutch clients for each other. It's paragraph 7, subtitle 4. So be careful on that one. So I don't even know if that's allowed to happen. But let's just assume that they weren't able to get past that, rule. I disagree with almost everything you said. So my answer is this is not light years ahead. So first of all, it's an expensive insult. It's like, hey, you want to insult a player on another team and cost yourself $50 grand. That ain't great. Also, low-key included an insult of Draymond in there, where he's like, can't have 2 non-shooters on the court. Draymond's like, hey, buddy, I did go 6 for 8 in a Game 7 of the NBA Finals from 3. Granted, that was 5 years ago, and since then he has become a terrible shooter. But still, Draymond's not exactly known to be a guy that doesn't forget insults. But the other part of it is, I just disagree on the merits that Ben and Draymond couldn't play together. Think about the Warriors in 15 and 16, Broussard. Sean Livingston was a huge part of that team. He shoots threes as rarely as Ben Simmons. Sean Livingston shot 5 total threes in 5 total postseasons with the Warriors. Shot 24 total in his 5 years with them in the regular season. So that's a touch more than Ben Simmons, but essentially he's never shooting them. Also, those Warriors pre-KD, you'd have Mo Spates or Festus Ezeli or Andrew Bogut on the court, often with Draymond. So if you ran a lineup of Steph, Clay, player X, whether it's Poole or Wiggins, I would say probably Wiggins.
Oh, it's Wiggins.
Draymond and Ben.
Wiggins.
Okay, so let's say it's Wiggins. I think all of a sudden you have a great defensive team. Not good, great. Ben and Draymond are 2 of the best defenders in basketball. Wiggins, I gave you credit for this. You were right. I had underrated him as a defender. We don't know what Clay will be as a defender. But the other reason, Wilds, this is just missing the mark, in my opinion, by by Joe Lacob is, this ain't your job, bro. This is Bob Myers' job. And sometimes you do things that put your team in a tougher position. And we found out yesterday, there was an article in San Francisco Chronicle, Andrew Wiggins, as of right now, would not be allowed to play 41 home games this year for the Warriors because he's refusing to be vaccinated, and San Francisco won't let you play if you're not. If he sticks with that stance, then you have to make a big trade. And Ben Simmons would be the best guy you can get. So none of this to me is proper commentary by Joe Lacob. None of it.
So I would love to see Simmons on the Warriors, and I think you made an interesting point about the defense. Like, we don't know Clay. Like, the idea that Clay is going to be this all-world defender that he used to be coming after two injuries, I don't buy it. I think he's going to take a step down, so I think Ben would be great. Here's the other thing about Ben joining the Warriors. You got Steve Kerr, you got Steph Curry, you got Klay Thompson. You have 3 literally of the best 3-point shooters of all time. And what I thought was interesting about Lacob saying, he doesn't shoot, look, Ben is not a finished product. And I know that he has had his struggles, obviously, but my answer is Horford inspiration. There is a path here. We look at how Al Horford started his career. The guy literally took no threes, none. First 8 years, he took 65 threes. Then he popped up in 2015. He's like, you know what? I'm going to take some threes. He took 256. In the last 5 years, he's took over 1,000, Broussard. So look, I don't think that Ben Simmons, the story of Ben Simmons and how much he shoots is over. Granted, Horford didn't want to, and he was a better shooter mid-range, and Ben's, still questionable. But it is something you can learn, and being in that Warriors environment would be the perfect place to learn it.
Well, look, Wilds, to double your point, Jason Kidd's an even better example. Couldn't shoot a lick when he came into the league. Left as one of the top 3-point shooters, at least in production, when he retired. Nick, look, I'm not saying it is impossible for Draymond and Ben to play together, because you're right, it might work. But to your examples from 2015, Sean Livingston used to come off the bench, and then Festus Ezeli or Andrew Bogut, they were rim protectors. So they were 7-footers that played at the rim. So there's a little bit of difference. Plus, the NBA, even in those few years, has changed a bit to where sometimes you need more shooting. But
that's right.
It's not impossible. I just don't love it. I'd love it more if Draymond were in the trade and you got back Simmons.
Fortunately,
well, here's what we do know. It's going to be rocky road ahead for Philadelphia ahead of the start of the season. Let's talk some Patrick Mahomes because, Nick, the guy does not lose 2 in a row. He wouldn't. Would he? Could he? No. Is he under the most pressure entering week 3? We got that for you next.
Is he under duress?
Well, hold up. Time now for a segment we like to call Under Duress, where Chris Broussard takes a deep dive into players around the NFL in need of a primetime performance this week. Chris Broussard, take us through it. Who is under the most duress heading into week 3?
Jenna, I know Nick is on the edge of his seat wondering if his man Pat Mahomes made the list. We'll see. We'll see. All right. But he's not number 5. Number 5 would be Ezekiel Elliott. Look, the bottom line, Ezekiel's been outplayed by his backup, Tony Pollard, in the first 2 games. And it's starting to become a story nationally. It's not a narrative yet, but it's a story. If he goes out against Philadelphia, and it's the same old thing. Now, Philly's been good against the pass the first 2 weeks. So Dallas may need to rely on the run like they did last week. If Pollard outperforms Zeke again, this national story will become blown up, become a narrative. And while Zeke still could remain professional and team first, it could cause problems. Players are being asked, should Pollard be the starter? What's wrong with Zeke? Is Pollard getting enough touches? It just could potentially become a problem in Dallas. Zeke could have changed it all by going out there and turning back the clock and looking like the Zeke of old. All right, at number 4, following Zeke, we got Baker Mayfield. Now, you might say, hold on, Baker's been good. He's been solid. He's been okay. All right, he leads the league in completion percentage at almost 82%, so that's good. But he's got 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. That's not great for a game manager, albeit a spunky one, but he's a game manager, and you got to be better than 1 touchdown, 2 picks. All right, and they are going to need him to throw the football this week. Chicago, we know, pretty good against the run. All right, but he's without Jarvis Landry, his top receiver. OBJ might be back. He practiced fully yesterday, so if he comes back, how does Baker manage that? Remember, last year, he was better without OBJ because he seemingly didn't feel the pressure to get the celebrity receiver the ball. So I'm watching Baker. Remember, this is a guy that wants a deal making about $40 million a year. So if he plays poorly, this could be the difference between a lucrative contract, $40 million plus a year, or the franchise tag. All right, at number 3, we got Dave Gettleman. We go up to the front office, the GM, the embattled GM of the New York Giants. Look, it's his 4th year. They're 15-35 under Gettleman. They're not going anywhere. They at best, they are standing still. All right, but they might actually be going the wrong way. Nick, you think they're the worst team in football. Some questionable moves by Gettleman. First of all, drafting Saquon Barkley number 2. Now, this is not a slight on Saquon, who's been hurt for half of his tenure. It's a slight on running backs. And I love running backs, but in today's game, you don't draft a running back number 2, especially when Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson were on the board at QB. All right, that's not to mention hiring Joe Judge. I'm a fan of Joe Judge. I love the old school approach. But at the end of the day, it's about wins and losses. All right, and Joe Judge was a 38-year-old special teams coach. You passed over experienced coordinators on both sides of the ball to go with a special teams coach. If he doesn't win, it doesn't look good. And that's not to mention Danny Dimes, who's been more like Danny Drops with all the fumbles and the like. Gettleman could be in trouble. All right, number 2. My man, Jameis Winston. Now, there's a narrative going around on this show that I picked him to be the MVP. Stop it. All right, a dark horse MVP. We're forced into a bold prediction, something you know's not going to happen, but you got to throw it out there. That's what I did. I played by the rules. You guys went safe. But I do like Jameis, though. I still like him. I think he's closer to the 5-touchdown Jameis in week 1. He looked bad in week 2. All right, no doubt about it. 2 interceptions. He's got to come out there and play well, or the narrative. That narrative can always get you. You know, you want to keep that thing positive. Yeah. The narrative will go negative if he has another bad game this week. And Taysom Hill's always just a moment away from getting that starting job or playing more possessions than James. All right, at number 1, the guy under the most duress.
Who is it?
I don't think I'll get any pushback on this one. Mike Zimmer, the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. And let me say this. Zimmer's a good coach. 64, 49, and 1 in his 7+ seasons in Minnesota. But here's the problem. That's a long time to be in a place when you have had very limited postseason success. All right, and he has had very limited. The 6 coaches in the league who have a longer tenure in one place than Zimmer, look at them. They all won Super Bowls, and they're lapping and triple lapping and double, all that more than Zimmer as far as playoff victories. So Zimmer, they're 0-2. We know how tough it is to make the playoffs at 0-2. If they lose this week, and they play Seattle, so a loss could be, is likely. 0-3, it looks like they'll be out of the postseason, and Zimmer will likely be out of a job. Those are the guys who are under duress. Nick, your guy survived Mahomes. He was close, though.
Yeah, well, listen, I got to tell you, I was a little anxious that you were going to ruin, just obliterate all of your great work with 5 through 2 by erroneously and ridiculously and really kind of, vulgarly putting Mahomes at 1. But you stayed true to your integrity and honesty, and you put Zimmer at 1. And so I think this is a great list. I'm going to not petition, because that's Wilds' stupid birds thing. I'm going to advocate for an addition. Sorry, Wilds, stray. And it's going to be hard. We're going to try to squeeze him in there. And this guy's not really a middle seat type of man. But I think you got to find room, hard to find the room, for Big Ben. And here's why. Quietly, Big Ben has been terrible. And it's not just this year. In 2019, he popped his elbow. In 2020, he fell apart at the end of the year. And this year, he has been quarterbacking a team that has scored 40 points on the year, 12 of those via field goal, and 1 via special teams touchdown. Last year looked good, then fell apart. That trend is continuing this year. When you look at his rankings across all major passing categories, it's like, oh, wait, that's all terrible. He's 25th in yards per pass, 25th in rating. He's thrown 2 touchdown passes. And if you're Pittsburgh, nobody can argue the Steelers don't have a great head coach. Tomlin's extraordinary. No one can argue the Steelers don't have a great defense. I think Cam Hayward's playing as well as almost anyone in football. Minka Fitzpatrick's great. I know they've dealt with a couple injuries, but they have a great defense. The problem is Big Ben cannot push the ball down the field. He's 39 years old. Yep. He's been on this trajectory for a while now. We just haven't really acknowledged it. So I think there is pressure on Big Ben to show he has something left. Or else, I mean, there's already minor, quiet, I don't even want to call it buzz. It's just kind of, a murmuring in the background. Should the Steelers call Cam Newton? So I do think there is some pressure, or I think Ben is under a lot of duress already 2 weeks into the year, Broussard, given how last year ended particularly.
You're right, Nick, in that he hadn't played well. But they are 1-1. And here, I think the bigger problem, you mentioned Ben not being able to push the ball down the field, I think it's that offensive line. We know he's not a mobile quarterback. He's a statue. And he's got no protection, nor does he have a run game. It's looking a lot like last year toward the end when they lost their run game. So I think those are built-in, I'll go explanations rather than excuses. I agree he's got to pick it up. Cam Newton's a good name because you're certainly not going to Mason Rudolph. And we haven't even heard a peep about Dwayne Haskins. So I think those
Nothing
things
else.
keep the duress level a bit low, that there's no viable replacement other than Cam Newton who's out there. So that's why he didn't make the list. But I'm with you. He struggled.
All right, Broussard, I'm going to also add one person. And first I want to say about Jameis Winston. Going into Foxborough, look for the Patriots, who feasted on Zach Wilson, had 4 interceptions. Look to them to have even more interceptions. Not more, but also to pick off Jameis a few times. Your Jameis MVP prediction, looking worse by the day. Looking worse by the day. So I would take your money out of it.
I can't believe you were so set on Jameis at MVP, Broussard. You were positive. Like,
I'm
this
going to add
guy's the one.
Saquon Barkley to the list here. So I'm adding Saquon to the list for this reason. We didn't know how he was going to come back off of injury. We saw 2 major running backs get hurt last year, right? Christian McCaffrey and Saquon. Christian McCaffrey didn't play, came back, looked great. When Saquon's kind of like, hey, is he 100%? Is he not? And like the reporting around it was very odd. If he's not 100%, let him rest until he's 100%, until he looks like Christian McCaffrey. They didn't do that. They played about half the snaps week 1, moved up to about 84% of the snaps week 2. Here's the weird thing. He's got 23 carries for 83 yards. Like, not great. One of those rushes, Broussard, was a 41-yard scamper. So if you take that out, he's averaging less than 2 yards a carry. He's not hitting the hole. He's looking for these big plays bouncing around. Maybe that's injury related. Maybe it's the offensive line. I want to see him hit more singles, less home runs, and strikeouts. So, like, don't get tackled behind the line. Just hit the hole. Have a slow and steady movement up the field. Less home runs. So I'm saying if Saquon doesn't have a big game, this idea that he's like this huge superstar, I think we have to probably start re-examining it.
Well, look, I don't mind putting Saquon in parentheses next to his GM, Dave Gettleman, who drafted him, because you're right, he struggled. As far as his running, the way he runs, even his rookie year when he played well, if you notice, he had a lot of short gains or negative yardage plays, and then he'd break one. Yep. You know, there's a little bit of Barry Sanders in Barkley. And so I don't think that's related to the injury. I just think that's kind of who he is. The thing is, this isn't 15 years ago when you're going to give the guy 25 carries unless he's Derrick Henry, and he can make up for those things and bust a big one every, 1 or 2 big ones a game. So I think you're right, Saquon. I just feel like he is what he is. He's a running back, and I don't expect him to turn the Giants' fortunes around, especially, again, when their offensive line isn't much, and the passing game isn't really keeping the defense honest about the run.
All right, just to recap, these are the guys under the duress, and Broussard thinks Jameis is your runaway MVP. Back talking Bucs, Rams. The stars will be shining bright Sunday in Hollywood. Make sure everybody knows it. They should. Your words. Should Brady and Tampa be worried about Stafford and company spoiling their perfect start? Talk about that next. First things first. Love you, Broussard. You're so funny. Oh, back here with our favorite former head coach, 3-time Super Bowl champ, Eric Mangini. Good morning, Coach. We don't have time for pleasantries. We're jumping right in. We're talking about a guy you know a lot about, Tom Brady. He and the Bucs in L.A. this weekend to face Matt Stafford and the Rams. A showdown of 2-0 NFC teams, 2 teams with their sights set on returning to SoFi Stadium for Super Bowl 56. With that, it is time for Coach Mangini's game plan. Coach, if you were Sean McVay, what are you harping on this week to beat the Bucs?
Well, it's so interesting, Jenna. When I first looked at this game, I thought of Nick and I thought of doing something with Tom Brady, but I know that Nick doesn't believe that Tom Brady has anything to do with Tampa's success. So I thought I'd look at the Rams offense and what they do, just to get, because that's the only thing that matters with Tampa Bay. So looking at what they have to do and looking at the Rams challenge, the first thing they have to do is they've got to protect the football. They've got to protect the football against a very opportunistic defense, and Tampa Bay's defense has been top 5 in takeaways last season. They're top 5 in takeaways this season. And when you look at their game last year, the only reason that game was close is because of 2 second-half interceptions that leads to 10 points. And when you look at the game last week against Atlanta, there's 21 points off of turnovers, including 2 pick-six. And so it seems like it's a blowout, but it's really a blowout because those turnovers and the points that it generated. So that's the first thing they have to do. And the second thing is they've got to be able to generate big plays. And this offense is set up to have big plays. There's several of them built into the system, and Tampa's defense is a hard defense to go the long, hard way against, to have those long, sustained drives. And the numbers, Tampa's given up 10 plays of over 20 yards this season, 10 pass plays, where last year they only gave up 46. And the Rams have generated 4 plays of 40-plus yards already this season, where all of last season they only had 6. So there's going to be some chances there, and they need to be able to do that. And then the third thing, and the most important thing, is they have to be able to handle Tampa's multiple disguises and pressure looks. And Tampa pressures at one of the highest rates in the league. They did it last year at about 39%. This year, they're over 40%. And they do a really good job of forcing post-snap reads. And I'm going to show you a great play from last season that illustrates what the Rams need to do. This is actually early in the game. It's a third down play. It's on the first drive. It leads to a touchdown and ends up going for a little under 40 yards. And what Tampa's doing is they're showing a cover 2 shell, and they've walked the linebackers up in the A-gap. This is their core blitz look, and they can bring either one of those guys or the guy off the slot. All 3 of those guys are a potential threat. And what the Rams are going to do is they put all 3 wide receivers on one side, and they put the tight end on the other side, and that gives them man-zone answers. It tells them right now the corners aren't over, so Tampa's playing a zone. Post-snap, Tampa rotates down into cover 3. They drop out one of the linebackers. The other linebacker runs a game with the defensive lineman. The Rams do a really good job of creating a pocket and buying time. Now they can read the slot corner. Woods is going to come up and hook it up. Kupp's going to go behind him. There's a huge window there. You can see the space. They hit Kupp in the window. Kupp has a nice catch and run, and it goes for 39 yards. It's a big play because they handled the look. They handled the disguise. They were able to pick up the pressure, and this is what I'm talking about. And what I want to do is I want to show you a play from last week, and this rarely happened, okay? But in last week's game, Atlanta runs exactly the same offensive formation, exactly the same. Tampa runs exactly the same defensive front. Atlanta can't handle the pressure. You're going to see Matt Ryan pressured. He doesn't have the post-snap read. He goes to the hook player. Now it's a pick 6 for a touchdown. And that's the difference between handling it and not handling it and what that potential is.
Wow. All right. So hold on. So I want to. All right. So first of all, this is a good reminder.
Coach.
Football's really complicated.
Well done.
Football's really complicated. And like there's so many things going on that go into why a play works or doesn't. But so I want to better understand, Coach, the comp between last year, the play against the Bucs, or the Rams play, the 2 plays you showed. Yep. Tampa did the same thing. I know the offensive formations were the same. Tampa did the same thing defensively. The difference was the pressure got there, or they also changed what they did coverage-wise?
It was exactly the same pressure look. It was essentially the same pressure. The only difference is they brought one extra player, but that player had no effect on it. The issue was more the fact that Atlanta couldn't handle the game inside the way that the Rams did. But identical formation offensively, identical defensive look, identical shell in the coverage. One handles it, one doesn't. And the post-snap read, trying to pressure the ball into the short route, where we saw the slot corner sit on it against the Rams, just like let's see how he sits on it against Atlanta. Now, don't go to the right space, touchdown.
So I wanted to make sure I understood. So I guess my question there is, if you can handle the pressure in that look, it's going to work. Like what Atlanta was, that play for Atlanta should have worked. It's probably what I don't know, if they saw on film the same thing you did, where they recognize it and it gets blown up because they can't handle the inside game, right? Because Matt Ryan sees pressure coming in his face, so instead of having the extra second, he has to get the ball out because he's getting hit. And that's the difference. I mean, by the way, time score situation here, it's a 10-point game. There's plenty of time left. If this play doesn't happen, it's very possibly going to be a 3-point game here in a few minutes, and Tampa's in a real fight. Instead, this ended the football game.
Yeah, and what Tampa does a really good job of is they'll bring that look and bring pressure. They'll show that look and only rush 3 players. They'll show the cover 2 shell like they did against the Rams and then rotate down to a cover 3 shell. So it really forces the quarterback and the wide receivers and the offensive line to make all of these post-snap decisions. And if you can't navigate through the things post-snap, that's what happens. You get a guy free in the quarterback's face. The quarterback thinks it's 2 deep instead of 3 deep and goes to the wrong read. And that, outside of having good players, Tampa does a nice job of putting pressure on the offense mentally.
Coach, I agree. I think those are great points about the offense for the Rams, what they need to do. Let's go to the other side of the ball. How would you use Jalen Ramsey? Like, would you put him on one receiver and say, take away that receiver and leave the rest of them to your other defenders? Because obviously they got a lot of weapons. Or would you just have him play, various receivers? And if you'd have him lock in on one, who would it be?
Well, when you look at the success that they've had this year, Cooper Kupp's having a great season. And to me, he's underrated in terms of what he's done and what he's able to do. And he's been an issue early in the season for everybody that played. So I would probably if you're going to take one out, typically what you do, Chris, is you take one out and you double the other one. So if you're going to isolate one player, and we used to do this with Ty Law and Otis Smith all the time, we'd put Ty Law on their best guy, and then we'd use Otis to beat up their second best guy and roll the safety over the top or have some type of combination to try to take out those 2. Now, what that does is when you have that type of concept, it limits what you can do from a zone perspective and what you can do from a zone blitz perspective. So typically you'll have a package where you're going to say, okay, we're going to handle their 2 biggest threats, and then you have the rest of the core defense that allows you to be multiple and do the things that you have a lot of reps built up on.
So would you try to have Ramsey take away one guy or not? Or one of Tampa's receivers?
I would mix some of that in, Chris, especially on 3rd down, and I would probably have Ramsey work. If I had to choose, I think I would take away Kupp at this point because it's been – what's that?
Right. No. I just thought we're getting the teams flipped around. So if you're going to take away one guy from Tampa, I think what Chris was leading you to is Mike Evans, and because Kupp's Antoine Winfield or someone's going to have to deal with Kupp. But just to kind of follow up on that point, when you have a corner as good as Jalen, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, is it a better philosophy? I think people usually see number 1 receiver, number 1 corner. But usually in today's NFL, number 1 receiver is going to win that matchup because the rules are slanted in their favor. It's so hard. But if you put your number 1 receiver on their second biggest threat, which with AB out, that probably means Godwin, right? And then you double their number 1 threat in Mike Evans. Is that, in your experience, I know you're talking about mixing things up, but in your experience, is that more of a successful method where you can have your number 1 guy eliminate their second threat and then you always have a double on their biggest threat?
Yeah, we would typically do that, and the thought process is to get the double team on the number 1 threat and to be able to give a variety of double teams on the number 1 threat. That ends up being very frustrating to the quarterback, and it ends up being very frustrating early in the game, and usually a team's number 1 threat wants the ball early, and if they don't get the ball early, they go back in the huddle and they complain about not getting the ball, and then that adds angst to the offense. Look, I've been on plenty of sidelines where our best receiver comes over and says, "Hey, I'm open," and you look at the pictures, and the guy's double teamed, and he's got no chance of catching the ball, and there's no way the quarterback would go to him. But great wide receivers, they think they're open on every single play, so it becomes an argument on their sideline and in the huddle.
Yeah. Coach, so entertaining, so informative, so fun having you to explain all that. Thank you so much. Really great stuff. Much appreciated. We are going to take a turn, talk some Chicago Bears. The rookie Justin Fields, can he steal the starting job from Andy Dalton? Well, Dalton is sidelined. We'll tell you what Matt Nagy thinks about that. But first, you guys see this kid on TikTok just roasting the Jets? Check this out.
If there's one play that sums up the New York Jets, this one has to be it. This Patriot's winning off the edge. This Jets lineman is probably holding. There's a Patriot charging up the middle at Zach with no blocking at all. This Jets dude is being pancaked on the ground. We have these two idiots staring at each other like, yo, what are we doing? I don't know, let's just stand here. We have 78 touching his own lineman. On top of that, we have two receivers with zero separation, and the cherry on top has to be Zach Wilson throwing this pick. And Corey Davis has no hops.
Some stories to start your morning, sponsored by Ram Trucks, built to serve. Big game coming up week 3, Bucs, Rams. Fox Bet Sportsbook has Tampa favored by 1.5 points on the road Sunday night. Road favorites, and for good reason. Brady and the Bucs have been pretty dominant through 2 weeks of their title defense. Matt Stafford and the Rams present another challenge against a viable NFC Super Bowl contender, though. Nick, should Brady and the Bucs be worried about Stafford and the Rams?
100%. Most notably, they should be worried about the Rams part more than the Stafford part, because you have the two best defensive players in the entire sport. They play on the same team, and they work brilliantly together in Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. By the way, usually I save betting advice for Friday, but America, the Rams at home getting points against anyone other than Kansas City, gobble that up while they're healthy. This is a ludicrous line. It's a ludicrous line. This line implies that if this game were in Tampa, it'd be Tampa by 7.5. Get out of here with that. If there's anything we know about Brady, and he has been brilliant this year, there's no arguing against that. But at every phase of his career, there is one thing that bothers him more than anything. Pressure up the middle, not off the edge, up the middle. And who is the best, arguably, in league history at that? Aaron Donald. He's inarguably the best right now at it, and he's on the very short list at the best in the history of the league at it. So you have that. You also have, I think it's sneaky important that Antonio Brown's going to miss the game with COVID stuff. I think that matters because it makes the Rams defense a lot easier, the Bucs offense at least slightly easier to game plan against. And on the flip side of it, Broussard, Dak Prescott moved the ball up and down the field on this defense. Matt Ryan moved the ball up and down the field on this defense. I think Matt Stafford is right in between those two guys. I think he's not quite as good as Dak, and I think he's a little bit better than Matt Ryan. There's no reason to believe that Matt Stafford won't move the ball up and down the field on this defense. So this game at home, I really like the Rams, and I think the Bucs should be very concerned. I think you could argue it's the single toughest game on their schedule.
Nick, all good points. I got to admit, those are good points. And yes, Tampa Bay should be concerned. However, I still got them winning. All right, and you mentioned Matt Stafford. This is a big test for Matt Stafford. He looked great in week 1. He looked very good in week 2. But he is 8-67 in his career against winning teams. 8-67, that is horrific. I don't expect you to have a winning record, but 8-67. So this is a big test. First team of that caliber that he'll face this year. Let's see what he does. Everybody will want to blame that on Detroit, right? But you pointed out, Nick, he had Calvin Johnson for nearly a decade. He had Jim Caldwell, who in 3 of his 4 years as coach in Detroit had 3 winning seasons. So you can't put it all on the franchise. Some of that was Matt Stafford not stepping up. Let's see if he steps up against Tom Brady. Here's the second thing, Nick. And you mentioned things Brady hates. All right? You know what else he hates? He hates the fact that he lost that undefeated season back in 2007. That they went 17-0, was it 17-0? And lost the Super Bowl. Eli Manning said, whenever we see each other, Brady always brings it up. It still bothers him. And it also bothers him, word on the street is that, it bothers him that you picked the team to go undefeated this year, and it wasn't Tampa Bay. All right, so I think Brady is going to have that locker room on the street. Motivate. There will be no like letting up. There's no, I know they won't take the Rams lightly, of course, but I think they're going to be jacked. I think it is one of Tom Brady's goals. What's one of the few things he hasn't done? Go undefeated. So I think it's one of his goals to maybe go 20-0 this year, win the Super Bowl. And so I think whilst Brady's going to have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers jacked, and they'll play their best game of the year.
I mean, the undefeated season is an interesting take. I don't think Tom Brady's looking past the Rams. You talk about people who are fired up. Last time we saw Aaron, this is the biggest game of Aaron Donald since we saw him crying when he got knocked out of the playoffs. So I think Aaron Donald is going to come like a machine after Tom Brady. He was sacked 3 times last week. He coughed up a fumble once on the hit. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure. Here's the other thing. The Bucs offense, and we talked about it last week, is flying too high. Too high. This pace cannot continue. And I think, like Coach said earlier in the show, once Jalen Ramsey takes Mike Evans out of the game and AB is not there and Gronk slows down, maybe he doesn't watch film, maybe he's watching so much film, his girlfriend's mad at him, we can't figure out what the narrative is there. I think they start to get a little frustrated. Also, Nick, and I know you like this stuff, I'd like to see this team win on the road. They haven't won a road game. I'm going to count the Super Bowl as a home game since beating Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. They're finally going on the road. They got 2 massive matchups against the Rams, and then you go to Foxborough.
Well,
do I think Tom Brady, in the back of his mind, is thinking about Foxborough?
Massive.
I do a little bit.
That's all right. You walked me right into it. You're right. They started the first 2 games. Listen, this is the benefit, by the way, of winning the Super Bowl. You guarantee you start the season at home, and you get that extra rest before week 2 that your opponent doesn't get because you play on a Thursday. They earned it. Like, I'm not holding that against them, but it is a reality when we evaluate them. The other element is this. I believe for the Bucs Super Bowl chances, for the bye in the NFC, for tiebreakers, for all of this is the biggest game on their schedule. But that's a cold, calculated reading. From an emotional perspective, the biggest game on their schedule is not only not this one, it's the one right after this one. And while Brady maybe is, he's been doing this for so long, he never looks ahead, I almost feel like his teammates might, on his behalf, that there will be some internal pressure within the locker room that has that Patriot game circled from the moment the schedules came out. And I don't think that's unreasonable to say. So I think there's a lot of factors here, along with the fact the Rams are awesome. And Broussard's totally right. This is one of the biggest regular season games Stafford's ever played, so we need to see him do it. But even without the Patriot game coming up next, Jenna, this would be a tough spot. With it coming up next, I think it's a Bucs loss.
A great 2 weeks for the Bucs and Brady to watch. That's going to do it for us. Skip and Shannon pick up the conversation right now.